Bobby, I wanted to ask you. I have a friend out of the Dallas Fort Worth area named Wayne Stokely, who's a drummer who is currently playing in Lillian Axe, and he will absolutely kill me if I don't ask you about your time in Riot because he probably would rate Thundersteel as one of the greatest albums of all time. So, quickly give us a little summary of your time in Riot.
Um, well, that was my first big gig. I would say, Juggernaut played, Texas shows and that sort of thing. And it was never sort of a consistent thing. And it was Metal Blade, but it was what it was. There's that fly again. Came back.
Does he have a name yet?
Cameo.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that was crazy to get a gig like that at that time and fly to New York, and that thing, my first time on a plane and that sort of stuff. But I mean, it was great working with Reale. And by the way, Mark's birthday is tomorrow. Mark Reale.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
how old would he have been? Do you recall?
58, maybe.
Okay.
57, 58, which is
all right.
crazy because I'm 57. And to think that he was,
I always thought those Riot guys were way ahead of us. You know what? They weren't.
Yeah. Well, he was born in 55. So, yeah. And he died like 8 years ago, something like that. Yeah. So, but, working with Mark was great. Mark was definitely a team player, kind of guy where, as far as songwriting and what everybody had to bring to the table as far as, they're playing and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, him and Don wrote that Thundersteel record and musically, and Tony Moore then came in and his crafting the lyrics and his voice and stuff was amazing for that time. And even though he's very sort of Halford-ish, maybe people would say, or this or that, he just didn't have those influences at all. He just had that, could do the high voice and that sort of thing. And that's why I think he sounds really unique on that record. But Mark and Don put that record together, Thundersteel. And after that came out, we worked on The Privilege of Power, which was really experimental record, great record. And we kind of tried to push the boundaries and all that sort of stuff. The thing with Riot that did suck in a way was we never could, like the band was always just that niche sort of thing, where we could it never got beyond that. And Riot's career was like that forever. I mean, with the early records of like Fire Down Under and Narita and Rock City and all that, it was always just that band that never got the big break or whatever, or got beyond that hump, but
legendary status.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is
the numbers. Maybe the people counting the money didn't like where the numbers were going, but I'm telling you something, the fact that we're talking about Riot and the layers of Riot because of the lineup changes after Fire Down Under, starting with Rhett Forrester, and then the band sort of peeled off and became, what Thundersteel is, which is not the old band. It's power metal, and it opened this other sort of like new world for Riot fans to either hop in or go, holy shit, this is like. I mean, that's Mark Reale. So I get the Riot thing, and that's Mark Reale's guitar playing. I get it, but holy shit, this is a different thing than just like, like early Riot records sound like, Diamond Head or, a new wave of British heavy metal type of a thing that would eventually become like, popular with, via Iron Maiden and Def Leppard. And the styles are sort of mixed in between. This was like, oh shit, get ready, Europe, because Riot's already big in Europe and Japan as a legendary stat type of a thing. And here's Thundersteel, which now you guys coulda, woulda, shoulda, if not you did, and I just don't know it, headline all those fucking festivals. Whatever.
The weird thing, you're right about that and the fact that when Thundersteel came out, this was before the internet and all that. This was 88. So Thundersteel was huge in Europe, and we never even went to Europe on that record, or Privilege of Power. And we went.
What about Japan? You went to Japan?
Well, yeah, and that was weird too, because we did Thundersteel, and then we did a 3-week tour of the U.S. 2 runs. We did one run like 2 weeks, and then another 3-week or something, and then that was it. Then it was kind of like, okay, let's work on the next record. And we were writing Privilege of Power, and we were done with it. Had completed the record. The record was completed. It just wasn't released yet. And then the booking agent at that time told us that Japan really wants Riot to come over and now basically wants to book a tour. And we were like, well, we got this new record coming out in a few months, and they sort of pushed it back. And we then had this tour of Japan scheduled, 5 shows in Japan, and we played 2 songs from the Privilege of Power, even though the record wasn't even released yet, just as kind of like, hey, this is going to be our next record. And we did that one tour of Japan, 5 shows. And then 7 months later, we went and toured on The Privilege of Power, because then that had come out like 2 or 3 months after we had done the first tour. But it was funny, like going to Japan, like what you're mentioning about Europe, we had no idea that we didn't know, in a way, we didn't even know what songs to play, because we had based our catalog sort of more upon, what was popular in the States and that sort of stuff. So when we went to Japan, I still remember we flew into Narita Airport, and then we did interviews for a couple of days, and it sort of became apparent that we were kind of a big deal there, in Japan at that time. Masahito was doing the interviews, and he's huge in Japan, had his own TV show, and
Tomato Rock Show.
Yeah. And we did all that stuff. And then I remember we did, the first show was going to be in Osaka, but I remember we did Tokyo. We did interviews for 2 days. And then we took the bullet train to Osaka. And the crew got there before us, and kind of just had, and was already doing like logistics for pre-production sort of things for the show the next day. They were kind of getting together with the Japanese crew and all that. And I remember we took the bullet train, and then they picked us up in a bus. And we were in like just a school bus kind of stuff, thing or whatever, charter bus, So we're just in a bus, and there's just the 5 band members and, whatever, the booking agent that went with us. And I remember, like, we get to the hotel there in Osaka, and there's like 200 kids like outside the hotel. And we're like, what the hell's going on here? We thought it was some kind of like a wedding or some kind of event for these kids. We didn't know, like we had no clue, And our crew comes they're like getting through the door, and they come onto the bus, and we're like, well, what the hell's going on here? What is this? And then he goes, these fans are here for y'all. And we were like, what? 200 kids outside of the hotel. And it's weird because in Tokyo, they put us at a hotel that was kind of on the other side of town, because they wanted to avoid that. So we were there for 2 days and had no clue. And we were like, these kids, everybody is here for, we couldn't believe it. It was insane. The hotel front sliding glass, welcome Riot on the hotel, glass,
fucking Beatlemania, bro.
And we ended up, they got us off the bus, and then we get into the, like they had our rooms for us and stuff. And you arrive in your room, and you get like this nice welcome note from Mr. Udo, who brought us there.
Yeah,
the promoter, major, he brought Michael Jackson, Madonna, everybody did. Japan. And so we get these these notes and flowers and all this kind of stuff to our room. And so we got to our room and we all kind of like, we're just blown away. So then we come back downstairs and we signed autographs for about 3 hours, for all these fans that were hanging out. But we had no idea. And this is, like I say, this is before the internet, of course. And so, but we ended up playing, those 5 shows, and then we went home or whatever. And then we ended up, it's funny too, because Don calls it coat on chest, like, when you sleep, when you just have your coat on your chest and you're sleeping on the floor.
Yeah.
And it was like, we're at the, it's like we're treated like kings in Japan. And then we come home and we're sleeping at the airport, coat on chest, It's just, and then we have pictures of us, and we even took pictures like we're in the street, like sleeping with the coat on, like pretending like we're sleeping or whatever. It's just kind of, it's one of those weird, funny things where, I mean, it happened, I mean, Jason, as you well know, when you're in this business, you have the highs of, when you're on top, and then you have the lows. And just because you get up this high doesn't mean it keeps going and keeps going like this. Your career goes like this, and the money goes like this, the fame of whatever you want to call it goes like this, and it just keeps it just forever.
Yeah,
and
it's inconsistent.
It's so inconsistent. And that was the one thing that being in Riot, I mean, that was my first sort of impression, was that that whole Thundersteel and Privilege of Power, and then going to Japan and stuff, and then coming back, and then it was like, the band just, there was nothing in the States. But the one great thing about, and I think Dangerous Toys was on CBS, wasn't the band Columbia?
Yeah, it was, when we got the deal, it was CBS, but then like a year into the contract, Sony bought it. But yeah, it was CBS. So the original pressing had the red label with the yellow writing, like your favorite Aerosmith record or whatever, the old CBS label, which I always thought was fucking awesome.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Yeah, it's the old school. But then Sony, yeah, whatever. That was pre-CD. That was before CDs, right before CDs. I remember CDs were new in like 90.
Wow. Yeah, Riot was on CBS Associated. But, the one thing about it that we did learn, and the most important thing at that time, was if you were somewhere in the world, being that we were on CBS, people were able to get the record, being on a label like that. So, and that's later we learned how big Thundersteel was in Europe, and we had no idea. And so it was years later that the band finally got to play Europe. And by that time, Tony Moore wasn't in the band, Don wasn't in the band, I mean, it was like different members in the band. So
was Pete Perez in the band at that time? Okay.
Yeah. And
another San Antonian.
And not only that, but that was not, that was 90. Riot finally went to Europe in 93, maybe. And I wasn't even in the band at that point. So, when the band finally goes to Europe for the first time, there's the only guy that was in that Riot and that Thundersteel Privilege of Power lineup was Mark, So It's kind of a shame how some of that stuff works out, where it seems like you have your window and then you missed it. And Riot did sort of at that time miss the big sort of European thing.
Yeah.
But had Japan, but never, Europe.
Yeah, you didn't get to bathe in the glory of Thundersteel at all. That's very, very sad that you guys were a part of something that made that like I called it legendary status. And the fact that it's Riot is another like thorn in the foot of the journey of Riot, how it just didn't get there, I think that what Don has done, we're talking Don Van Staveren when you hear Don or DVS or whatever, when he, when you think about what he's done with this Riot 5 thing, he's done extremely well with taking
Yeah,
it
he has.
to that level of finally there is some like kingdom you
Hmm.
can stand in and bathe in for a moment, even that relates to what coulda, shoulda, woulda been the Thundersteel glory day.
Yeah, and Don has worked his ass off,
Yes, he has.
with the Riot 5 thing. And when he was putting it back together, I mean, we've talked, several times about, me being involved in it. And at different points, I kind of was going to, over the last several years or whatever, but just never really worked out. And it's tougher for them. Being that I always had my schedule with Sebastian or Fate's Warning, where they're sort of trying to build something where they couldn't get, like a 6-week tour or whatever. And I could never, and Don was like, hey, you want to do this one festival? And I'm like, well, I can't really commit to one festival in June in, next year at this point. It kind of turns into that. But he's done really well with it, and they sound really good. The singer is great.
Yeah, he is
Todd
great.
Michael, he's a great singer, and and they've been able to do a few more records since then.
Yeah, and I think that it's continuing what Thundersteel created.
Yep.
It's that power metal thing. It's that Euro style power metal with a Riot name. They get to do the catalog of Riot, whatever they want, but it's like they're doing fan favorites to tie in with the new way. And I think that it's great that there is some loyalty to it at all,
Yeah.
and not just trying to cash in on something because it's not really a money grab whatsoever. Don loves the band and loves Riot, and him and Mark were so close that I think that is the reason. It's like Mark Reale is a big reason why I think Don's heartstrings are attached to the Riot name. And I think that him like taking this new band with these new records and the tone and the sound being relevant and sort of attached to the Thundersteel legend, I think is beautiful.
The thing about that record, Thundersteel and Privilege of Power too, and anything that Mark has written, like after that, I would say, I mean, if you could compare it, when Don sort of wasn't in the band on the albums, Nightbreaker, Brethren of the Longhouse, Inishmore, Sense of Society, there was like 5 or 6 records that Mark did with the band, probably more. And the band sort of had more of a little bit of a rainbow sound, more. And Mark, because Mark was really influenced by that. Don kind of had that more power metal element.
Yes.
So it kind of, it shifted a little bit to a little bit of a different sound. But the great thing about Mark is that record, Thundersteel especially, Mark used to sit in his bedroom with a guitar and like a song, I don't know if you know the song Flight of the Warrior, but Mark would sit in his bedroom, shining, and he just play like just with an acoustic guitar, and he had all these melodies that I mean, he could write. And I mean, that's one thing that, I mean, he had that great vibrato, of course, that, sort of Gary Moore sort of kind of thing that guitar players now, of course, don't have that at all, but
no, that's a soul that they're bringing to their guitar playing that actually makes them an individual.
It does. I mean, you hear a guy like David Menichetti or any of those guys, they all have that.
Paul Kossoff. I love Paul Kossoff from Free. His vibrato is so sick. It just sounds like the weeping willow. It just reminds me of the sirens singing across the ocean that, are taunting you. It's a soul. It's hard to, sorry, I got colorful there, but it's real.
But Mark would sit there and Mark would just and he would just kind of like sing his melodies and stuff and whatever, and then they put that over the heavy metal double bass and whatever, a gallop or whatever. But Mark had that songwriting ability. He really did. I mean,